Welcome back to the True Geordie podcast. I am Brian, and today's guest is one of my favourite fighters of all time. Not just for the in-ring performances, but for the mic skills, for the entertainment, for everything he brought to it. Surely he's got to be in the Hall of Fame. It's Chael Sonnen. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Brian, what is happening, man? I've been counting down the days. I'm pumped to be here with you.
Mate, honestly, this is a surreal moment. I remember getting the pizzas and beers in with all my boys, watching you fight and beat the living hell out of Anderson Silva. And little did I know that one day I'd get to have a talk with you, man. It is such an honor. And you know, I mentioned the Hall of Fame there. We've seen Cowboy Cerrone get his little moment the other day, and it was a lovely moment. But how on earth are you not in the Hall of Fame, surely?
You know, I got to tell you, and that is something that I want. Like, guys kind of play coy with that. Oh, whatever happens, and I don't really care. I do care. Like, I think that's a great honor. You know, when somebody picks that and your career's done and somebody else, one of your peers, a group of your peers, look back and they bestow that. I think that is awesome. Cowboy went in, and, you know, the Cowboy story is very misleading unless you followed it, because he changed weight classes so much. Like, some people will look at his record. It's like, well, you got to understand, those were in different weight classes. Those were on 5 days notice. Those were without training camp. Some of those were main events, 5-round fight. He won a whole bunch of fights like I just described. But yes, it goes both ways. I thought it was pretty cool that he got recognized. You know, he's off doing movie work now. I've seen 3 different movies during COVID that's got Cowboy in them.
Yeah, I love the fact that he said, I got on steroids, I feel great. He was so honest about it. And with everything you've done for the sport, and when I look back at your career before this interview and seeing, you know, the pay-per-view numbers you and Anderson did, and I think you're one of the real single-handed people who are instrumental in making this from just a pure, gritty, horrible sport in many people's eyes to entertainment. You brought the WWE there. And yet I remember seeing some of your first press conferences. You were quite quiet and you weren't that guy. So everyone talks about the Colby Covington switch that flipped. And I know you were released by the UFC once upon a time as well. Was there a moment where you realized, like, I got to turn this up here?
Yes. I mean, I remember where I was. I was driving an old pickup truck that I had. I was headed down 205. I was headed to the Beaverton exit. I mean, I remember this, and I was doing an interview with Ariel. And as big as Ariel is now, it was a little different back then. Not everything was face-to-face or in that beautiful studio. He was still, picking up the phone and dictating some stuff. But I was getting ready to take on Yushin Okami. And I was ranked number 9 in the world, and Okami was ranked number 2. Okami was the last guy to beat Anderson Silva. It was by disqualification, but he had a win over Anderson. And we're getting ready to fight out in the Forum in L.A., and we are not on the main card. We were the only match that had 2 top 10 guys against each other that was not on the main card. And I blamed it all on Yushin. You know, he was being too nice, and he was being so polite, and this was about honor and respect and bow. And I just cut a heel promo on him, but I meant it all. It was very authentic. So, man, I got to go and fight on undercards in front of these guys. The number 2 guy in the world, the hardest fight that I've ever had, and nobody's going to see it. What is the point of doing all of this? And it's all because of him. Nobody wants to tune in. Nobody wants to see him. I've been on the main card. I draw this guy, and now I'm pulled off. And Yushin went on to be one of my very good friends, but it was just one of these heel promos. And Brian, I had a hard time doing that, by the way. I appreciate you recognizing that I was kind of responsible for the entertainment era, because it was a contribution that I made. But I had a really hard time. I had one commissioner who wasn't going to license me, and he even said that I was a bad example for kids. I had never used profanity. I still to this day, Sports Illustrated named me the greatest SHIT talker in sport, but I'd never actually said the word. Spelling it for you right now is this close. You know, I was very in a box, and I just thought that was inappropriate, and this guy was falling for it, and he wasn't going to license me because of what a bad sport I was. I didn't have honor and respect, and I was nothing for kids to look up to, and he didn't license me. By the way, he got his way. That was in Nevada. They were going to have me do the Ultimate Fighter opposite Michael Bisping. I did not get my license, and I did not do the Ultimate Fighter. He made me sit in timeout, all because of interviews that I had done. When I was in college wrestling, if I could just tell you one more, when I was in college wrestling, this is before the internet was a thing, but we had our local paper down in Eugene. I was doing interviews like this. I was calling out other teams, and I was talking this up, and I was trying to hype a match. They killed the spot, and the coach told the interviewer, no more interviews with Chael. They cut me off for media. So they just didn't understand it. And I was trying to go, no, guys, just run it. Just one or two of these things. It's going to work. This is going to be helpful. But they didn't see it.
It's okay to get in a cage, man on man, and beat the living hell out of each other, but it's not okay to say some bad words. And the fact that you didn't actually swear, which is something that you're so good at putting someone down, that you must have a hell of a vocabulary, because that is often missed on people. Why was the reason you didn't swear? Because it's very helpful sometimes if you're wanting to say something.
For sure. Well, and so I wanted to be the bad guy, but I wanted that to be a little bit confusing. Like, I wanted people to like me while I was being the heel. And that's a really hard thing to do. Like, I mean, I don't mean to compare myself to The Rock, but that would be an example of a cool heel. It's extremely hard to do. So I just thought, okay, I'm going to go after these guys. I'm going to break all of these rules. I'm going to tear down all of these barriers that we got, but I'm not going to swear. And as long as I don't do that, there'll still be guys that are worse than me. I wanted a bad guy persona, but I didn't want to actually have character problems or be perceived like that. So it wasn't an overly thought out, but that was the reasoning at the time.
For me, when I'm watching the UFC in this era, and I don't know why this is happening, but it feels like it is regressing a little bit and more into a sport and less entertainment. Obviously, McGregor hasn't fought anywhere near as much. He was another person who brought that sort of razzmatazz to it. And it feels like we're actually looking at less stars than I've seen in a long time in the UFC, although that might just be me. But I'm interested to get your take on it. Do you think there's a reason for that? And do you find yourself being frustrated watching these modern day stars not grab the spotlight the way you did?
Oh, it drives me crazy. And I love the observation that you just made. I mean, 2022, from a business standpoint, we've never had a year like that. I mean, 2022 Dana White would be kicked out of the office by 2007 Dana White. I mean, it was a very different approach, and I do see what you're saying, and we weren't really building the stars, and we weren't getting behind them and promoting the fights in the same way. And then you go and look at the gates, and we're doing, 4.1 million for what was supposed to be Prohaska versus Glover Part 2. They ended up changing that to the last second. Ankalaev gets thrown. They still did a 4.1 million. I mean, some of these gates are just remarkable. They're selling out absolutely everywhere they go.
I feel like the brand UFC, though, sorry to interrupt you, they can now get a little lazy, and I don't know if lazy is the right word, but they can rely on the brand more than the personalities. But I feel like with the brand being bigger than ever, it would only supercharge it if some of these guys, like if we look at what Paddy Pimblett was able to do with very little, it wasn't like Paddy was like the most amazing performer in the octagon that we've seen, but just the personality that he had, he immediately became the most talked about thing in the UFC, because there's no one else to compete with right now for me in terms of him talking.
I fully agree with you. A lot of times somebody will suck all the air out of the room. Like if you get a press conference and Conor's on the stage, you're not going to get very many questions, and what you do it's going to get missed. Conor really is going to come in there and command it, and I see it the way you see it. I think that those are opportunities. I think that when you have that microphone, you've got to really use it. I think everything's a competition. If you're at a press conference and you get asked 2 questions and somebody else gets asked 12 questions, I've been in that spot before, and I've grabbed my phone and I've text people that are in the audience, please ask me this. I mean, all of that stuff is things that people pay attention to. It's what gets broken off. It's what the you and I's come and talk about. It's what really helps to parlay and move it. And I do agree with you. It wasn't as star driven in this last year. The brand was getting over, not the athletes, not the matches. It looks like that right now as well. I'm not really seeing a change, and I'd like one. I like the entertainment.
Yeah, I think when Dana White is sat there getting frustrated by all of these questions about Jake Paul, that really should be a wake-up call to him of, why are they not asking me questions about my fighters, And I think that's because Jake Paul has a similar idea that you had, let me just talk the talk and try and walk the walk as best as I can to back it up. Was there ever a point when you were going off on one of these speeches and selling what you were going to do to another fighter, where you sort of put the mic down and walked backstage and then thought, Jesus Christ, I've actually got to go and try and do this to this creature right now,
Yes. Some of them, some of those guys got pretty upset. They didn't really understand it. One of the first guys that I ever broke this out on was a guy named Paulo Filho. And I was relatively undiscovered. Like I name dropped for you a while ago that I got to a number 9 ranking. I was ranked nothing at the time of this. I wasn't even in the organization. They brought me in to go get beat up by Paulo, who was 16-0, undefeated, but he was ranked number 1. Anderson was ranked number 2. Paulo was ranked number 1, and they were workout partners. And the words coming out of the camp is that ranking was right. Paulo was the best guy. So as I was building that fight and getting ready to fight him, I had just gotten signed. I had no backstory other than I was a pretty good regional fighter. So I came at him pretty hard. And my big line was that I have a picture of him that I put in my shoe so that every time I take a step, I'm walking right on his face. That was it. But at that time, that was like the worst. That was the dirtiest thing that had ever been said. And I saw Paulo Filho's eyes after they played that for him, and he looked sad. It looked like that hurt his feelings. I felt terrible. I thought it was going to work him up, and he's going to come. He's going to rip his shirt off, and we're going to get this back and forth. He looked like I really hurt his feelings. I didn't say another bad thing about the guy. It bothered me that happened.
You eventually beat that guy who was the WEC champion. Unfortunately,
yes.
He missed weight, and you didn't get the belt that you deserved, but you were world champion, but you weren't crowned champion. What was that experience like? 'Cause that's so strange.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. I mean, that was a hard one. That was a hard one for me. I know people say, well, it's got to be this championship. Or not for me, it doesn't. I don't care what words you put in there. I don't care if you put interim in front of it. Whatever words you want to do. If it says world champion, I have achieved a life goal. Yeah. So, it was a big deal, and it was a rematch. It's hard to get to him the first time, building your way back, getting to him a second time. And they had never had this happen. This was in Florida, and Mark Ratner himself told me, who was in charge of the rules, he said, Chael, we never envisioned that a champion would miss weight. We've had challengers do it, but we don't have any mechanism within the rules. We didn't know. And he said, moving forward, if the title holder is the one that misses weight, the title is still on the line. And that's what the sport's done. That's what they have done ever since. But for that night, it defaults down. Rules are the same, matches the same, but it defaults down to a non-title match. He mailed me that belt, so I have the physical belt, which I thought was a very nice gesture. But yeah, to your point, I wasn't champion. I don't get to claim that I was, which hurt, man. That was a real opportunity. I would like to have that moniker.
You've got to give yourself that. You've got the belt. You beat the champion. I mean, what more does anyone have to do? It's not your fault.
No, I hear you on that. I wish that they'd go back and rectify it. I would take it, right? I mean, nobody would know but me, but it would still mean something to me. Can I ask you something totally off topic? What is going on? What is the vibe around you as it pertains to Jeremiah versus Joshua? Is that a fight that people are really wanting to see? Is this mega business?
Oh, God. I mean, that's a good question, mate. You know what? The reality is, this is the quietest fight week that Anthony Joshua might have had in as long as I can remember. So he has gone from selling out the biggest stadiums in the UK to now he's slowly selling tickets for a small arena now that, just to give you some perspective on it, KSI, the YouTube fighter, sold out this arena twice, much faster than what Anthony Joshua is currently selling tickets at. Now, obviously, those tickets aren't cheap, but the fact is the reputation of Anthony Joshua, as much as I think he was a great champion and took on all comers, it has been damaged. When you look at his last 5 fights, he has lost 3. And out of the 2 he won, 1 was a decision against Andy Ruiz where he popped the jab, and a lot of people felt like he ran away. He didn't go out and bury this guy as he was supposed to. And then the other one was against Pulev, which he was supposed to knock him out. So there's been a complete lack of these devastating Mike Tyson type knockouts that he was basically known for on the come up. And it's do or die now for Anthony Joshua's legacy, in terms of if he wants those huge fights, he needs to go out and put a beating on this guy. And it's a pretty hard fight to be expected to do that. So he's caught between a rock and a hard place right now.
I'm sensing that. I mean, I'm feeling that over here. I wasn't overly familiar with Jeremiah. I wasn't overly familiar with Ruiz. I mean, there's ways to build matches, but it just seemed like, you got Wilder. You're hearing even the rumors of Francis Ngannou. I thought maybe something interesting was going to happen. And I was a little surprised that at the matchup, frankly.
Yeah.
And do you think it will sell out? Do you think this will end up being a big deal? And by the way, is Joshua going to win this fight?
I think he wins, and I think it will sell the remaining tickets. But the problem with Anthony Joshua is he's such a nice guy and a gentleman, and he never talks trash, and when he tries to, he's terrible at it. So your selling point is knockouts, and if you're not giving those knockouts to your fans, and you've only knocked out one guy in the last 5 fights, and Usyk really embarrassed him a little bit, he put on an absolute masterpiece against him. So he needs to go in there and do and remind people what he was great at. And but also it's pretty much he'll retire if he loses. That's what he said. So it's pretty definitive.
It feels like that. And by the way, there was a rumor that I think his name is Chambers. He took on Mayweather in an exhibition out of the UK like a month ago. There's a rumor that flopped, that nobody showed up for that and it bombed. Is that accurate?
Yeah. My friend went to that fight and he said there was 2,000 tickets sold in a 20,000 arena, and 1,000 of those were probably giveaways. So,
sure.
And the other 1,000 were probably the money team. So it was humiliating for Floyd to be going out there against a live opponent. Don't get me wrong, Chalmers is a reality TV star, but the guy has combat sports experience. He fought MMA in Bellator. I think he did Muay Thai for years, and he has very fast hands. So you're putting yourself in a situation where, all right, Floyd isn't going to get hit, but is that worth it? And I think that there was probably a behind-the-scenes investor who was convinced he was going to make money on this. And sure. The thing with Floyd is how much longer does this carry on for? And it seems like he really intends to keep doing it. And I feel like he might just pick the wrong guy at some point. I mean, he's heading towards 50 years old, and he's fighting young studs like Logan Paul, who they're not boxing at his level, but it just takes one shot, one zig where you should have zagged. And I just don't see why he's doing it. But I think the money must be necessary for his lifestyle.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think the only thing that's more embellished than Floyd Mayweather's pay-per-view numbers is Floyd Mayweather's net worth. And I'm fine with that. I never thought the exhibition thing would work if he's got somebody that wants to lose some money. I mean, boxing has survived over time because you got somebody that's willing to lose some money to attach himself to the tough guy business. So, but I did hear that. I heard the same thing that you just said, that there was 2,000, there was 20,000 seats available. Somebody took a bath, and that might end the experiment at least momentarily.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because when Floyd did the Logan Paul exhibition, I was like, okay, this makes sense. This is a real big moment. People are interested. We care. But now he seems to fight anyone. He'll just get in there with any YouTube kid, and the specialness is totally worn off now. So yeah, it is a bit embarrassing. But I've got a question about your experience with some of these great fighters, because they call Floyd the GOAT, and sure. You're the only guy who has shared the octagon with Fedor, Anderson Silva, Jon Jones, and you've sparred GSP. So you might be the only person who's ever legitimately experienced what it's like to fight all of these GOAT contenders. Who is your GOAT?
I will tell you, all of those guys are awesome, by the way. Just to get sour grapes out of the side, those guys were great. But George St. Pierre had a very unique feel. It's very hard for me to explain the strength that he had. I'm blown away. I was much bigger than him. I'm very surprised that his opponents have not done interviews and talked about the uncanny strength. He will hold you in positions where you just can't move, and I've never been in that spot, particularly with somebody that's smaller than me. I mean, when I went into the workout, I had a full head of confidence that if I get in a jam, I can just use my size. When you're trying to be a good workout partner, I want him to invite me back and make this something that I could do multiple times. You got to not use that size. You got to not use that power. But I knew I could turn to it if I had to. And I tell you what, it wasn't there. I mean, it was one of these things where we're bumping him and moving him, using strength, using size. It was just a feel that was very unique. And then he had philosophies, like the great martial artists, like say Bruce Lee, that sticks around for the ages. George had philosophies, and one of his philosophies is that you only go 5 rounds in a workout. You get warmed up and you go 5-minute rounds, and there's no point in being conditioned to do anything different. That's what championship, and that's just what his belief was. And it didn't matter if he stayed up late the night before, what coach had in mind. He was going to get warm. He was going to go 5-5s. He was also extremely disciplined to detail. When we drilled together, he would not stop and release. So, okay, now it's my turn, until everything was perfect. And he'd even go into leg locks and he'd adjust and he'd turn his heel and he'd turn his toe and he would look at it and he'd drop his elbow down. It was one of these things where generally when I drilled my whole life, it was how fast can you go? It was a conditioning workout. It was this really hard pace. I go, boom, he goes. And George's wasn't like that. It was very technical. These were just a couple of things that I remembered, but it did make him stand out. And I thought, overall, for well-roundedness, I think when they talk about the GOAT, they got to talk about St. Pierre.
The interesting thing is that you've been very honest about, like, one of the few, actually, and I give you credit for this, about your PED usage. When I looked at George St. Pierre, who was in what we kind of refer to as the PED era before USADA, when you look at George's stomach, that he had this tortoiseshell like stomach, and a lot of his freaky strength where he would manhandle anyone, and he was in better shape than every other fighter in the non-USADA era. I wondered if you ever questioned his lack of or usage of PEDs.
Yeah, I always wondered that too. I mean, right, there was something there where it's such a slippery slope, because USADA and WADA are so sensitive that if a guy was in violation of that, people automatically think that it's an anabolic or something illegal.
Sorry, he retired just as USADA came in, and there's a lot of people speculating, like, you've been calling for drug testing for years, and the minute they come in, you're like, right, bye.
Yes, no, I remember that time. Yeah, it lined up, and so it was a little bit interesting. But gosh, it's hard to say. I mean, if you see George now, he looks the exact same. I mean, guys that use PEDs, or at least anabolics, which that's all that you and I are really talking about, is anabolics. Yeah. Like, whatever the PED list is, fine. Are you using anabolics or not? But guys that do that, their body changes when their career changes. George weighs the same thing. He's still in the practice room. He looks the same. You go pat him on the back. He's just as thick as he always was. I mean, every now and then there are just freaks of nature. Yoel Romero is one. First time I ever saw Yoel, he was 19 years old, representing the Cuban national team. He looked the exact same, competing at 185 pounds. He was in the Olympics in the year 2004, in the finals at 185 pounds, the same thing he weighs today. Some guys just get lucky, bro.
Obviously, you had a lot of those fierce rivalries that you brought out of people. Was there anyone who you genuinely were like, I hate this guy, like, this is the most I've ever disliked an opponent?
Yes, definitely. Vanderlei, which I don't feel that way now. Now I like Vanderlei and wish him well. But I Vanderlei, well, because he frightened me. He was one of these guys where I didn't know if I could trust him. I knew when the fight started, this guy was vicious. I mean, they called him the Axe Murderer for good reason. Yeah. And he used to be over in Prime. They would kick guys when they're down and stomp them in the face. I mean, he really was a very vicious style. But I didn't know if I could trust him before the referee said go. I didn't know if I could trust him on stage. I didn't know if I could trust him at press conferences. And I did an Ultimate Fighter with him, and we got into it 2 different times. One time they showed on TV, but there was also another time. And so you're just kind of on edge at all times. And the only thing I know about fighting is the same as any other guy, which is whatever your father told you. And my father's thing was not, you can defend yourself if as long as he throws the first punch. My father's thing was, don't ever let them within range. If they're upset and they're within an arm's distance, the fight has now started. So go. And that was the thing with Vanderlei, is I could never let him get close. Like, as soon as he would get in, I couldn't trust him. And so that wasn't fun, quite frankly. That was kind of an uneasy way to go about life for a while till we got that all resolved.
That was a great moment for TV, though, when you said, I can't let you get close. If you get close, I'm gonna hit you. Like, that was such a great lesson for young men watching that. Like, this is
my father's rule.
Yeah,
that's right. Like, you can yell at me, but you can't do it in this range. You just can't.
Yeah. Was there ever an element of fear that you felt more so with any opponent?
Oh, I would imagine. I mean, I will tell you, when I left the locker room to take on Jon Jones, I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, my whole life I've heard the expression, a lamb going to slaughter. This is what they're talking about. Like, I remember actually thinking that. Like, I was bouncing around. I had on this cool robe. Tap Out gave me a robe, and I was walking out of a robe, and everything was going well, and I had the face on. But I remember thinking that, this is what that expression is about.
Wow.
And I hadn't been to 205. I did real well at 185. I hadn't been to 205. And then it was Jon, which was just something special. There's something long there. There's something awkward. He's got these elbows, some good wrestling to go. I mean, it's just one of these things where if you go and watch, 5 Jon Jones fights as a way of preparing for it, all you see is this guy destroying destroying 5 people. It was a very impressive highlight reel. And I thought I could beat him. I thought I could compete with him. I thought I could get him tired. I mean, I was game for the match. But yes, it was an awkward feeling to know at least what was supposed to happen or what people thought was going to happen.
Your relationship with Jon Jones is one of my favorite sort of fighter rivalries, because even though the fight wasn't as competitive as what you would have liked it to have been, you really got under this man's skin, even to this day. And the fact that he refused to fight you on short notice and had like almost a historic moment where UFC card was cancelled, and you got a lot of man points from the audience, because you were like, Shogun refused, and Shogun was one of the baddest people ever. Machida said no, you said yes, you turned up, and Jones backed down to you. So on some level, it's 1-1, mate. You know, he didn't show up, you did.
I did get a lot of credit for that. Yeah. I did get a lot of street cred for that, and that was part of my code. I mean, like everybody has a code where I told you I didn't use profanity, but that was another one, which is I'm going to say what I'm going to say, but no matter what, I will show up. I will show up anytime with anyone at any weight under any rule set. That was a real cool thing when I was doing it. Now as I'm looking back, you know, maybe that was a reckless standpoint, but I was proud of that. I was very proud of anyone, anytime, anywhere. And I knew a lot of guys said it, but very few guys did it, and that includes Jon. Jon said it too until he got called on it, and he said, no, I was a southpaw. But it was interesting. Like when I looked at Jon versus myself, I want to say he was like 23 and I was 36. I remember thinking he was clearly more advanced than I was. But when he backed down and said, his boxing scares me, he's a southpaw, I think he had more time, like whatever his thought pattern was, it did put a little pep in my step where I went, man, that's a real compliment. I'm being complimented here. Oh, yeah. You know, even if it's by my enemy, but there's something here that's very sweet.
And looking at it, the Jon Jones situation now, it's very interesting because the incident with his wife, the children asking the hotel staff to call the cops and all of that, I found it very interesting that the UFC even took him back, because I know he's a huge star, but this man is a wild card at the least. And have you seen the tweets from him in the recent days about nonsensical tweets? Like that, sure. A lot of people are thinking, what's going on here? It's like another Jon Jones moment where he's clearly not doing the life that he should be doing.
Yeah. Oh, no, I could tell. And sometimes he even blames it on red wine or he's into deleting it. Conor, disappointingly, is into the deleting the tweet, right? I think if you say it, you got to let it live. And you can bury it. You can put out more. There's ways to handle that. But just deleting it the next day and not addressing it, I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. I'll tell you this, and it's just for conversation, but there was a very tough moment. Jon Jones was with the police on the body cam, and he declared that he had CTE. He declared that. And it's a very big deal because here in the States, we are overseen by the commission that works at the discretion of the attorney general, who is supervised by the governor. That's the exact same thing as the police. So when the police, you have an agency that Jon is disclosing I have brain damage to, and he did it twice. And I only share that with you because if another state agency goes and licenses him, and something goes awry and Jon comes out and sues and says, I told you, you had knowledge. I told the police and it's right here. They are busted. I mean, you're talking about a $20 million lawsuit. This would have been devastating. And the commission didn't even hold a hearing. The commission didn't even make Jon check a box or sign off. They acted as though they hadn't seen him proclaiming to a state agency that I have brain damage. It was a really big deal. It would have been a blunder. I understand that's a road we shouldn't have gone down. But that's the biggest part of that whole story is that he told an agency that he had brain damage and another state agency acted like they didn't hear it.
And when you see that footage of him smashing his own head off of a police car, I mean, that's it's not normal behavior, you know, even for UFC fighters.
Well, this was right after they put him in the Hall of Fame. You know, everything was going his way, and I don't know what all he's into. I mean, he's pretty open that he likes to party and go and have a good time, but somewhere in there, because I will tell you, in all fairness, as hard as I am on Jon, I will share with you, if you catch him in the middle of the day and he's sober, he's very humorous. He's very charismatic. He can smile. He can dance and kind of get a rise out of the crowd. He's a narcissist, but it can be endearing, believe it or not. But then, you know, over the course of the evening, he seems to be a liability. He seems to be a guy that you might not want to be around.
Do you believe his denials of ped usage or not?
No, I don't know why he would deny him. I mean, early on, like when I locked up with him, and I had a higher juice concentrate than Tropicana. When I locked up with him in our fight, he pushed me straight backwards in that octagon. I mean, this was like a Mack truck versus a Volvo. And I remember as he was pushing me backwards, which I fought 50 men, including heavyweights. Nobody's done that to me. As I'm backing up, I thought to myself, I know your secret because I have the same one. I know what you're doing because I'm doing it too. And you apparently are doing a little bit more. It was just one of those things, when his body looked a certain way. This was a guy, his biggest enemies in terms of somebody that come out and talk trash about Jon was his own teammates. And that just came from a jealousy standpoint. They would go to the gym every day, twice a day. They'd be on time. He would do none of those things. He'd come in a few times a week. He would show up late. He would leave early. And then he'd go beat everybody up, make millions of dollars, and, get gifted a Bentley. It was just one of those things where it was his own teammates that would bury him. But you would see his body, my God. I mean, he was in 3 times more sculpted than I was, and I never missed practice. I've never tasted alcohol. It's one of those things where you can't do that. You just can't snap your fingers and change your body like that unless you're getting help. And I like performance enhancing myself. I know people try to give it a hard time, but performance enhancing, those are positive terms. I know people try to make it a negative, and it might be against the rules, and maybe athletes violated things, which is called cheating. But I'm just performance and enhance. These are positive things. I mean, it's one of my problems with The Rock, or even with the Hulkster. I wish they would tell people, or with John Cena, it's like, come out and tell people, you guys aren't breaking the rules. You guys have discovered something that's making you better. Share that with the world. Don't hide it from them.
And in terms of Jon Jones at heavyweight, is there a person who you feel is the biggest threat to him?
You know what? X's and O's is Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades, Jon's highest achievement in amateur wrestling was a junior college national championship. Curtis won that exact same championship. And Curtis is just a big guy. He's a little bit younger. Curtis does lead the right lifestyle. He doesn't like to come out and do a lot of interviews, but Curtis is a solid guy. I mean, he gets up in the morning. He's very disciplined. He's got coaches. He works hard. He can go 5 rounds if he needs to. I don't know that I would proclaim that anybody could go with Jon. That really is a once in a lifetime athlete. The fact that he just took 3 years off, changed weight classes, and had Surreal gone so frightened he didn't even have to fight him. I mean, he had him so frightened psychologically he didn't even have to go fisticuffs. Man, that's an impressive thing. It truly is. I think the Francis fight would have been fun. I think Jon probably would have thrown him down ultimately. And I think Stipe's a hard match. I mean, I really do. Stipe's 40 years old. But one thing about Stipe, and people don't know this yet, is Stipe, from his last fight, which was against Francis, he weighed in at 233 pounds. He put on 20 pounds of muscle. Stipe thought he was going into a trilogy with Francis Ngannou. So he changed his whole lifestyle, much like what Jon Jones just did, just to put on size. And 20 pounds of muscle on Stipe is a very different Stipe. I'm open to the idea.
Yeah, I like, obviously Stipe is a legend. I like him, but I find his infrequent fighting frustrating. I think Jon was very right in saying, you better take some time off of the fire brigade, boy, if you want to come and fight me. But for me, Tom Aspinall, I know I might be a bit biased with him being British, but the guy is lightning fast and has a really good ground game, really good stand-up. But you mentioned before about this CTE. Obviously, you've had a lot of fights. Do you ever worry about your brain health, given how sharp you are and how much you are all about, talking for a living? Yeah, does that ever cross your mind?
Yes, and it didn't used to. I used to think, and it was something that somebody I looked up to, could have even been my father, said, that's a guy looking for an excuse, having a concussion and things like this. Then that movie came out called Concussion with Will Smith, and it was based on a true story, and it impacted me, at least made me start thinking in that direction. Then I did see several fighters, a lot of boxers that were slowing down and having a hard time, even the great Muhammad Ali, just by example. So you start to see, man, this is a real thing. Then the guys in the NFL, and some of them were even leading to suicide, and they were talking about the pains and the depression they're having from CTE. So yes, I mean, I'm very aware of it. I don't believe that I took some of those shots, but I think it's a very real thing. I appreciate that coaches are monitoring it, that doctors now know what to look for. I mean, for the longest time, we didn't even know what to look for. I was in college wrestling rooms, and if you headbutted and you were seeing stars, as they say, you get back in there, shake it off. And it's a little bit more serious than that. I'm glad that we have the protocols in place that are starting to be formed.
I've heard Mike Bisping and a few other people describe what it's like to wake up after a knockout. Was there any time that you remember where you lost a specific period of time where when you finally came to, it was, you remember that?
I felt as though I got hit by a missile 5 seconds into my fight with Fedor. I mean, this thing was a missile, comes and it takes me, and I would have quit that fight right there. As I was falling to the canvas, I knew if this fight gets stopped, it'll be the fastest knockout ever. And I'm windmilling my leg. I just am trying to get a couple of seconds, so it's not the record setting. But I felt as though after that fight, for a couple of months that something was amiss. My memory wasn't quite there, or maybe I'd be speaking and I was having a hard time finding the word. I've actually wondered, because I've never known, is this real or is this in my mind? Have I created that this is happening as an excuse from the punch? I really don't know, but that is the one. If I could take any shot back I've ever taken, it'd be that missile Fedor gave me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason he's in the GOAT conversation. The man hits bloody hard. And going to one of the other GOATs who you fought, Anderson Silva, I always wondered, after you beat the living hell out of him for all those rounds and obviously didn't come away with the win, you get back into, say, the locker room. What are you feeling like in that moment? Because you did so well. This was at a point where we'd never seen even a little bit of Anderson Silva not looking like a dominant fighter. You called it all beforehand. We didn't really believe you, if we're being and then you went and did it and beat the living hell out of him. What was the emotions like after that?
It was devastating. Oh my goodness, it was so devastating. I mean, my whole life, I want to be world champion. Poor me that I didn't get it. But this was as close as I'm going to get, right? I had the incident with Paulo Filo where we got the weight scale issue, and then, found a way to let this one go. I had never been that exhausted as a human being before. I tried to get there in practice. I tried my whole life to get there in practice, but I had never gotten to that point. And I didn't know what round it was. My corner before the 5th round told me it was the 4th round. And I believe them. And I think that's a really weird excuse for a guy to go, I didn't know what round it was. But I didn't know. I mean, I was that level of exhausted. I was also very fearful of Anderson. I had a real urgency to get him down. I respected to the point of fear his stand-up. But that urgency made me sharp that night. It made me quicker. It made my pressure better. It made my timing and my range. There's one thing that I lost for the rematch. The first fight went so well that in the rematch, I didn't have that same fear and urgency. But it was just a devastating thing. And I was kind of getting it explained to me. Right when I got out of the ring, one of the first people I saw was Joe Silva. And he came around and he shook my hand. And I said sorry, because Joe's big thing was just entertainment. Were you excited? And I just said sorry. I just couldn't get going tonight. And I went in the back, and this guy brought me the of the night bonus check. He says, "Hey, Lorenzo and Dana want you to have this." And I took it and I opened it and saw it was the fight of the night. And I thought, okay, those guys feel bad for me. They're giving that to me because they feel bad for me. I was not aware. I was just not aware that it was a good fight or that people liked it. They ended up having a stat that it was 311 punches for me to 8 punches by him. But I didn't know that. I felt like, we were out there tit for tat and we were trading. It got to a level of exhaustion where I was very unaware. And when people ended up liking the fight, I was at least nominated for Fight of the Year. It might have even won it. I had no idea it was a good fight. When I told Joe sorry, I meant it. Yeah,
it's a weird sort of thing to have on your record. You maybe have the most dominant defeat in the history of UFC title fights. I mean, you were so dominant for so long as well. It wasn't like it was it was such a long amount of time where we watched you swinging the hammer, as you called it. And you know what? I wish you'd have won that, mate. I really do, because you deserved that. That you literally took everything. But that's why he was such a great fighter, to be fair to the guy.
I appreciate that very much. And I agree. Anderson Silva's a great competitor, right? He was always known for his skills and for his techniques and for his setups. But that's a competitor, man. You got to have a heart. You got to want it and have that burning desire to be able to hang in there, let alone come back, let alone find a way. And yes, he I don't know if he got enough credit. Like when that fight was done, a lot of the talk was, the rounds that I had won. But there's another side to it, which is he hung in there and he found a way with a minute left to keep his belt and keep his legacy, and I really respect it in him.
One of the things I've heard you speak about a little bit before was that obviously you talk about your dad quite a lot in conversation and how much he meant to you, and I think it's lovely that you still keep him alive in the way you do. And obviously you had that moment where you made that promise to him. For those that don't know about becoming a world champion, do you think that you maybe put too much pressure on yourself through what you built it up into from loving your dad so much and all of that?
Possibly, and possibly stayed in there a little bit longer, as well. Looking back, stayed in there till you're 42 years old. I think that's probably on a little bit further. The fighter's kind of the last one to know when the sun has set. The whole world sees it at least a year before the athlete does, and I was definitely guilty of that. I was selling myself on some of the ideas of I'm training smarter, not harder. Like, as my body was wearing down, and I couldn't put the work in that Coach Clayton Hires needed. I sold myself, but this is smarter. I'm doing better. I'm actually going to get further. Everybody has to do that at some point, right? I mean, most of our careers doing the same, which is face down and embarrassed. Lennox Lewis or St. Pierre, I guess you'd have to put Khabib in there. Very rare, a Mayweather style career. So yeah, on some hands, I think there was some pressure that was maybe undue. Maybe I misunderstood that. Now that I am a father, I want my young man to do that, through his years of education, whatever his sport is, whatever it is he wants to do. But I would keep him active, keep him busy, send him home tired. I don't want him out, roaming around with his friends. Nothing good happens with a young man in free time. So I would like to just take my son's time away, teach him a skill, and have him go home tired. I think that's really what my dad was after. But we parted ways before he explained that to me.
For some reason, you didn't actually do the retirement in the cage. Was there a reason for that? Because I would have thought that the Chael Sonnen retirement speech would have been the one to end all speeches.
Well, I appreciate that. I didn't know. And quite frankly, even when you retire, you make it look as though, okay, this is my idea and this is my decision. But there's always more that goes into it. At that time, I was with Bellator. Did Scott Coker want me back? If he did want me back, did he want me in the same position, or was I going to start sliding down the card, which is kind of the hint? Here's your hat. What's your hurry? And so you have a few of those things. You got to go out. You got to collect your thoughts, talk to your family, see who's available, see what it looks like the next match is likely to be. And if you don't have more checks in the positive column, sometimes you come in and act like this was the time and I was going to do it all along. But like everything, it's just part of the act.
If you, for whatever reason, you were feeling amazing and you could come back and fight one, fighter, would there be a guy who would tempt you out?
Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz. You don't want to be the guy that lost to Tito, and he rubbed my face in it so bad. And I mean, it really was. It was brutal. Things that people never saw. Things where I came up to him man to man. I'd known him for 20 years. I competed with him in college, and we had our moment. And he just smeared my face in it. And I just remember going, "What a jerk!" And I'm standing there. I stood there and took it. But inside, I thought, Tito, do you know what this is like in my shoes? You won. I lost. I got to go to the same press conference because it's procedure. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna put you over. All I want to do is get in my hotel room and scream. And he's giving me the business in the back. And it was one of those things that if I could get a match with Tito, I would take it.
Yeah, it was a strange one to watch that. I felt Tito had this little thing about him where he could get lucky. I remember him having this fight where everyone was like, he is finished, he is done. Was it Ryan Bader in the UFC where he pulled out a submission out of nowhere? Yep. He was a bit more slick on the mat than people gave him credit for. And he would win a couple of fights like yourself and Ryan Bader where you were like, how did Tito do that? But, he probably was better than what we gave him credit for. But yeah, I think you were very unfortunate because I fully expected you to steamroll him there.
No, I can see that position. I could have let go. I could have spun behind him. I mean, just the X's and O's play through in my head. And yeah, Tito was a good competitor. He was a rough guy. He was a real physical guy. I don't know that he did other sports growing up. No, he got into wrestling real early and was kind of from a tough neighborhood with street life. He respected his career enough to stick a needle in his ass every now and then. So he was pretty strong. You get in certain positions before you could wear him down, and they were some real threats. But yeah, that was a tough one to lose to, man. Tito definitely enjoys winning, and that was his moment. But, the winner's got to be a little bit polite to the loser, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think Tito had I don't think he could quite let it go. The things that you said that got under his skin, you must have really got under his skin.
Sure.
And to be fair to Tito, what I will say is, when I discovered the UFC, his era with Chuck and Randy was what was really blowing MMA up. And it is a bit weird now when I look back at the UFC. And I mean, Chuck's still in and around it, but to see Tito and Randy, who were so instrumental in blowing the UFC up, basically removed from history. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's tough. That's tough. And, and I'll throw another one in there is Frank Shamrock. Frank Shamrock, there wasn't very many times when we truly knew who the best in the world was. We knew the world champion was. But to actually know, okay, that guy, he's proven it. He's gone through everybody. I don't have any suggestions. That's the guy. We've only had that a few times. I would bring Vandalay from his Pride days. Mm-hmm. I would definitely bring Chuck Liddell, and I would definitely bring Randy in. And for a period of time, it was Tito. Tito knew how to get people down. He knew how to go 5 rounds. He knew how to put you in the fence. He understood the elbows with positioning, so he wasn't caught in arm bars. I mean, I think those guys should be remembered for what they were, and the same goes with Frank Shamrock. And Frank did it just to remind you when it was 205 pounds. They did not have a 185. They did not have a 170. They just had 205 in heavyweight. The most he ever weighed in at was 193. And he had his clothes on when he did that, but he weighed 193. That's his official weight. I remember because he wearing a Stanford wrestling shirt. But I actually talked to Frank. I saw him at Fedor's retirement fight. We were in the cage next to each other. I've never really visited with him. And I said, by the way, just wanted to tell you, you did a really great job. And you were a true champion, and you did it giving up all that weight. And he told me that most he's ever weighed in his life was 178. Frank Shamrock is one of those guys that we need to take a second look at.
I want to talk to you about some of these funny beefs that I see you having on Twitter, because the way you mock John Cena, for example, is absolutely hilarious. You seem to have a few of this. Anthony Joshua, who gets it, 50 Cent, John Cena. Is there a reason why these people get on your nerves and you just want to take the piss out of them?
Jealousy. It's pure jealousy. I can't stand it. Look at Anthony Joshua. He's world champ. Plus he gets to be handsome. Yeah. Look, he's 6'3", and he gets to be handsome on top of everything else. He got to go to the Olympic Games. He gets to be a national hero. John Cena drives me crazy because, John's another one of these guys that denies anabolic use, and I don't know why. He's not cheating. He's not breaking any rule. He's not buying it illegally. He's getting it from his prescription from a doctor. It's something that could help people, and so that just frustrates me. And secondly, he's not even on Twitter. This is clearly an assistant that is putting out these messages that are taken from a book. They're not his. He doesn't engage. They're not back and forth. And he's got 15 times more followers than I do. So yes, it is pure jealousy.
I love it, and I rate the honesty. One fighter you had a beef with not long ago, which I really enjoyed the back and forth with you and Conor, and it kind of felt like it was more Conor having a problem with you pointing things out, and him having a sensitive ego. I remember you being on stage with Bisping and Conor when Conor was just starting to sprout, and now he's coming at you. What was that whole situation like?
I did not like it. I did not like that Conor did that in public. And we've got our own private relationship, and he could have done. He's never come at me like that in public. I looked at Conor like little brother. I've had to correct the story. I've had to come in and clean up many messes that he's done. But I thought he viewed me the same way. I thought so when he did that, I go, oh, I'm a fool. He doesn't view me the way that I view him, or that I thought he looked at me. Then I felt a little bit foolish, but I let him know. I mean, I told him straight, this is my last warning. If we're going to do this, we're going to do, but you can stop right now. Stop right now. We'll call the whole thing off. And he stopped. So, I mean, I continued on the path of, trying to explain Conor. I feel like he's a little bit misunderstood. I thought it was a great entertainer. The last Conor we saw, he's broken in half. He's on the canvas doing an interview with Joe Rogan, and he's talking about the opponent and the opponent's wife. And so many people said, well, how disrespectful, what a jerk. And it's like, yes, quite possibly. Or you have an entertainer that is so committed, he is going down with the ship till the final note is played. And, it's one of those two. But I'm not certain that we know. I feel like you really get your money's worth with Conor. I feel like he entertains and adds a value that nobody else does in ways that nobody else does.
I agree. I was a huge Conor McGregor fan, and I've definitely gone off him as the years have gone on. Just the thing is like it's the lack of consistency. Like it's a little bit like Tyson Fury as well. Like you have to tell a consistent story to be believable for us to invest in what you're saying. And it flip-flops with him, and he says one thing and does another. And I'm very surprised that he is coming back after breaking his leg in such a bad way. And to take on Michael Chandler, for all I don't like him as much as I used to, the guy's got balls, because that is a rough fight to come back after a leg break like that when Michael Chandler's been out here looking fantastic. Even if he hasn't been winning all the time, he's top 5 probably. What do you make of that as a matchup for the first fight back?
Well, I'll tell you what, something here isn't passing the smell test. I mean, if I was just to back up on the timeline, so all of a sudden Conor's back, he's going to take on Chandler. Great. Why? Why are these two fighting? Moreover, when are they fighting? Where are they fighting? At what weight class are they fighting? So we're told these 255-pounders are going to fight at 170. Now, that was weird because now it's not for contendership. We know it's not for championship, but now it's not for contendership or even for rankings. So why are we doing this? Just as a pure cash grab? Okay, but that's not generally the way that it's done. So then they come out and they correct the statement. And they said, no, 155 pounds is where the weight class is. So they go to Michael Chandler, and Chandler says 155. They then go to Conor, and Conor says, no, it's at 170. So we don't even have a weight class agreed upon. I think that's weird. Secondly, Conor's boots on the ground, and he put out a tweet that he's going. I mean, if I'm to take him literal, and I do, that he's set it up camp at Big Bear. He's just started. Everybody's come in. He's rented out Big Bear. Well, camp is something that Conor traditionally does 8 to 10 weeks before a fight. And he's not in the USADA pool. USADA has spoke up and said from the day he enters, he must give us 6 months, which is 180 days. Conor's come out and disputed that. But, I mean, between the two, the agency themselves or the athlete, we have to think that it's the agency, and Conor still hasn't enlisted in the pool. He hasn't started that clock. And that's a very precarious thing. I mean, first off, are we getting ready to see a feud between Conor and USADA? If so, sign me up. But I want to know. Secondly, the athletic commission has the right to come in and test him if they're in his state. They're in his state. He is boots on the ground in Nevada filming The Ultimate Fighter. They could walk right up to him now. And I only say that because so many people are speculating the reason he's put off getting in the pool is he's still hot. He did something to heal his knee and it's still in his system. Okay, that would be a great reason to not go in the pool. I will just remind you, USADA is not the end-all be-all. You still have the state commission, and he's boots on the ground, and they've elected to not go in and test him. That's fugazi. This whole thing is very odd, and supposedly he's going to fight Chandler. Where are they going to fight at? What weight are they going to fight at? Who else is on the card? When are we doing it? When's the on sale? Where's the announcement? Where's the poster? Something about this is not right.
Interestingly, when Dana White was questioned on it, he said, I don't get involved in all of that anymore. And I'm like, it's the first time I've ever heard you say that. So if anyone is going to get special treatment, it probably is Conor McGregor. But yeah, it does seem very strange. Have you ever had a fight where, after turning pro, where a guy didn't know you were a fighter and he found out the hard way?
Oh, like in the streets? Yes, I have. I'm not a puncher to begin with. I'm always going to grab you. It's always going to be, but yes, I've had a couple of those where nothing happened. He didn't find out the hard way. But other people came around and set him straight. Pulled him back or whatever the separation was, and then tell him, and then he would come over and apologize and, say things like, oh man, that would have been really bad for me. I didn't know. And I just had something like that happen. I was at the NCAA wrestling tournament. I had this weird thing like that, but it was the same situation. I mean, nobody touched each other, but people came around, they told him, man, step back. You got this one wrong.
Yeah, someone did him a favor that day. And you mentioned earlier about your philosophy as a father. You come across as like Uncle Chael, to a lot of people. And even as your subscribers, we watch you and you drop a lot of life advice. And I think that's great that you do that because, we're in a society right now where there's a lot of fatherless sons out there, Right. And I just wondered, what is your sort of broad philosophy in terms of being a dad to your kids, in terms of discipline and how you're trying to guide them through life?
Well, I'll tell you, I got my little maniac right over here sleeping in a chair. We're going to get some ice cream after this, but I'm still learning. I mean, there isn't a manual on that, but I do believe that there is something very important in supporting the kid in terms of, let's try some different things, whatever it might be. And it doesn't even have to be athletic related, but let's find some things. Let's see what you like. And then I'm basically the chauffeur, right? I'll pay the dues, whatever they are. I got to write the check, and then I got to get him there. I got to get him home, but we got to do it every day. And I just think there's a real importance, particularly with a young man. I have a daughter as well, but a young man in free time, that just never works out. I know a lot of really good people, males, between the ages of 18 and 25, really good people, but between the ages of 18 and 25, they made one bad decision, one given to peer pressure, one they were up too late and they just made a decision and it changed their lives. You know, some of them are in prison, some of them hurt or injured, death, things like this. So yeah, I really like the idea of sending the kid somewhere where he uses a lot of energy. He learns a skill and he comes home tired. I think that that's important, but I think it's something you've got to do it every single day. I will always know where my kids are. I'll tell you that.
Have you ever had a conversation with your little boy about fighting, about, you know, if a kid starts a fight in school, how to handle that sort of thing?
Yeah, yes, we definitely have. He's at a younger age, and Brian, it's a different system now. You know, they got this anti-bullying. I mean, these kids are really nice to each other. They don't even use bad words. They don't call each other jerks and nerds, and I mean little simple stuff like this. So we've had those, and he's had a couple of formal boxing classes, and the coaches are real good at explaining you don't do this. You have the confidence to know you don't need to do this, and you don't do this. You can really hurt somebody. So we've had those talks, but they weren't from like a bravado of you go out there and you take it to them. It was nothing like that. It was keep your eyes on them, keep your distance, and find a way out of there.
One thing that really surprised me, obviously, you've always been the most stand-up guy, and we've seen a lot of UFC fighters had legal issues, but we've never seen you in any situation where, you know, you've looked in any other way other than a gentleman. And yet there was the footage that came out of you obviously being escorted out by police security, hands behind your back, looked like it had a ripped shirt. And it was a very strange thing. As a fan of you, I'm like, this can't be right. There's something up here. And from what I understand, you're in a situation where criminal charges have been dismissed. Is that correct?
Well, there are some that are dismissed, but there are some that are still withstanding. There was 8 people involved in this, which I got to tell you, I don't really like the score of that. I mean, not for nothing. They're drinking, I'm not. I got a shirt ripped off. My face is bloody, and there's 6 of you. I don't really understand why I'm the one being taken away. And my own lawyer said, you're never going to have, whether it's the DA, the police, or a jury, no one's going to feel bad for a prize fighter who gets in a fight with non-prize fighters. I said, even if there's 6 of them, really, they're all fine. I don't throw any punches. Meanwhile, my face is bleeding. Yeah, you're the one that's going to have the problem here. And, you know, it was one of those tough spots. I got to tell you, it is still ongoing, but I want to show respect to your question since you did ask it. But it was a very frustrating position because they asked me, have you taken anything? And I've never drank. I've never tasted alcohol. Took an Ambien. I was in my room. I was going to sleep. I thought that was I thought I would get credit for that. Hey, what an honest guy. There's no test for Ambien. You either admit that you took, or I said I took an Ambien. They tried to use that against me. Oh, he didn't know where he was. He was on Ambien. No, it's what are you talking about? I answered a question honestly. There's 6 of you. I'm bleeding. You're fine. And believe me, you wouldn't be if I started throwing. But it was just a really weird thing. And then they started having fun, Brian. I got to tell you, the people that were involved in this started having fun. They tried to hold a press conference. I mean, how embarrassing. They flew in to hold a press conference. They show up in special outfits. Nobody shows up, so it gets canceled. I got written by TMZ that told me we have never been contacted by somebody as often as we're contacted by these people. Like, they're just having fun. And it's a highly odd spot for me to be in. I don't feel as though this is a hard one for me to prove that I didn't beat you up. You aren't beat up. And I'm really good at beating people up. Well, I mean, but that kind of solves the problem. Like, you don't really get to say Chael came out and he teed off on me. You're fine. Yeah. And that is not a likely result. Like, I wasn't as good at this as Fedor and Jon Jones, but I was pretty damn good. I can handle I can handle some people in a hallway with no training. It was just a really weird thing.
Everything you're saying makes a lot of sense now, Chael, because obviously we know you're a stand-up guy. Like, if you are going to have issues as an MMA fighter, it's going to be consistent, as we've seen with the Jon Jones, and it is a shame because your career should not be used against you. The fact that you happen to be a fighter shouldn't automatically make people think you're some barbarian. Like, there are a lot of very smart intellectual fighters, so fingers crossed that this all is resolved for you, and you can go back to being the bad guy, because you are a good guy, ironically. But one last question: how would you like to be remembered?
How would I like to be remembered? I was very proud of the code. I had my own code and I fiercely adhered to the code, but it was anyone, anywhere, anytime, any weight class. When I got into the sport, I had my fifth fight. For my fifth fight is the first time I ever saw a scale. They had never I had never had a weigh-in, even a mock weigh-in where everybody's going heavyweight, but we never even got on a scale until my fifth fight. We wrapped our own hands if you were going to wrap your hands. You brought your own gloves. You agreed on the rules at the fighter meeting. So some fights wouldn't have the same rules. Like, two guys go, well, I don't want to do this. And then another one. It was just honor code. The referee couldn't remember what it was. I only bring to you, when I stayed in the sport, and my first fight in 1997, when I stayed in the sport and the commissions were formed in 2001, 2002, the sport is in a lot better place, but I didn't know anything about that. I didn't know anything about fighting guys your size or fighting guy, and agreeing on it was anybody. It was anyone at any time. And I kept that code, and I was proud of that code. And I know that I broke some eggs on my way to making some omelets, but I stepped in there every time I agreed to. I never pulled out. And if I had to answer for something, I answered for it the hard way. Well,
your resume proves that is definitely the case, Chael. You're fought a who's who. When I look through your record, it's that good. There isn't. You could argue you've got as good a resume as anyone in fighting. So, be proud of that, mate. And honestly, it's truly an honor to have you on the show. I've looked up to you for years, and thanks for entertaining us, and keep up the great work, mate.
By the way, I got to tell you, young man, I am very proud of you. I have followed you. I watched you start this thing with a microphone and an idea. Now you got over 1 million. You're one of the biggest shows out there. Truly, great job. You did it the hard way. You build up a reputation for yourself. You got people that trust you. They come to you. I'm proud of you, man.
That means a lot, Chael. Thanks so much. And if you ever need anything, if you're ever in London, then you got my number, bro.
Kaboom!
All right, take it easy, man.